4 o'clock.
Right.
This is the July 8th meeting of the Climate Policy Commission, and we'll come to order. I'm not expecting Chris to be here. Perhaps Gary will be joining us. Is there any comment on the minutes or a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Let's see, announcements. I believe that, no, I'm not seeing Elizabeth. I was given the impression that the next meeting in August will be in person.
I can chime in on that if you like. Also, Elizabeth is going to have to leave early. So I'm going to be your host for the evening. But I did ask Elizabeth about that stuff. Rick, you asked about the August meeting. Sounds like that meeting can be in person and can go until 6:30 in August. Tree Commission meets only the Thursdays before Planning Commission. So I think that is not going to be a factor for that next meeting. And then I think we had talked about going back to 6 p.m. ending time starting in September. So hopefully that won't be an issue after that. Let's see. Oh, this is something I don't know all the details on yet, but it sounds like at Tuesday's council meeting, there was some discussion about changing the code to allow commissions to meet either virtually or in person, but that you would have to make a decision about that prior to some deadline, which I think maybe August 17th. So I'll have to talk to Elizabeth about this because I'm not sure we'll be able to make I suppose you folks could make a motion on it tonight, whether you prefer to meet in person or not. And then we could try to reconcile it later. But let's see. Also, it's fine for subcommittees to start meeting in person now that the state restrictions are lifted. We're going to need to double check, though, too, that we notice everything with Elizabeth and submit minutes. And it's likely that there's not always going to be a staff person or a room available. So we'll have to have a system in place to sort that out. And standing meetings are probably a lot more manageable than trying to set something up new every time.
Stu, on the subcommittee,
Yeah.
do you need to warn and take minutes if there's less than a quorum?
I think that subcommittees can't have a quorum still.
Right. Okay, so you're saying by default you need to.
Yeah, I think that's going to continue to be the case. But you will have to take minutes and we'll submit those. I know some things have changed with how Elizabeth manages the minutes. We have some new software we're using, so it may be a little different than in the past.
Well, what if it isn't a subcommittee? It's just 2 or 3 commissioners.
Oh, well, then that's not an officially noticed meeting.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that nothing's fundamentally changed from when we last had these. We've been down this path before. And if we have standing subcommittee meetings, then they do have to be noticed and minutes need to be taken. So I don't know that I don't know. Do you all want to try to sort that out tonight, or might it be better to bring something a little more prepared back at the next meeting?
I don't know that we can have the elements to sort it out today. And I think it's not having subcommittees has worked pretty well. Just having, little working sessions.
Okay.
Among a couple of people. So I think we can wait till next time if somebody wants to bring it back. I don't know what other people think.
Stu, I think there was one other thing on the commission meetings. You have to decide if it's either video or in person. You can't do a mix, right?
Yeah, and I just heard about this recently. Tanya, do you want to say a word about the conversation at council, if you have a
Sure.
recollection?
Yeah, that's fine. So we've kept the emergency declaration in place for another month until August 17th. And in that time, the plan is to work to figure out how to transition back or into whatever that new process is going to be. And there has been discussion about wanting to be able to provide as much flexibility for commissions as they can have. But we do run into the issue where people need to be able to see them and attend them, and they're not recorded and put out on RBTV. So if the people need to either be able to go to a room where people are going to be, or they need to be able to go to a Zoom address where people are going to be. But it's much more technologically difficult to have a mix of some people in person and some people on Zoom. And we really only have probably the capability of doing that well in the council chambers. So for commissions that meet other places, like in the Siskiyou room where we typically meet, they would have to decide what it's looking like is that they would have to say, we're either meeting in person or meeting on Zoom. But there was some discussion that it might be that, you know, in the summertime, say, when people have a harder time getting to the meetings because they're traveling, a commission might say, we're going to have our next 3 meetings on Zoom through the summer and then go back to in-person meetings in the fall. So I don't know that you're locked in. It doesn't seem like the commissions would be locked in for, you know, this is how you're only going to do it going forward. But I think it's likely that it'll be either in person or online and not a hybrid. And you'd have to come up with some sort of a schedule so that it can be noticed properly.
And I think we have time to put that on the agenda for the next month's meeting before the deadline if needed. So,
Bob?
So Tanya, I heard you say that the emergency declaration has been extended to August 17th. So that suggests that we wouldn't be meeting in person for our August meeting, we would, because we'd still be under the
Right, you'd
emergency
still be
declaration.
under, yeah, and yeah, exactly. Having the emergency declaration still in place allows the Zoom meetings to continue. But you could meet in person if you wanted in August, because the state has lifted the meeting restrictions.
Okay, so my preference would be to just keep doing what we've been doing until it's settled down some more. Is there any opinions from the rest of the commission?
Which might mean 1 or 2 more meetings on Zoom?
Well, I don't know, but the August meeting would be video is what I'm suggesting.
Either way, it's fine with me.
I'm
That's fine.
okay with that.
Okay, let's just settle it for now, that the August meeting will be by video. Thanks, Stu, for looking into that. So council update.
So since we met last time, the biggest news that many of you probably already know is that the council did approve the on-bill financing measure that needed to be done in order to submit the USDA proposal for the no interest loan. So that you've been given clearance, or the staff's been given clearance in terms of what they need, I think, for the grant or the proposal. And I don't know that there is, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that pertains to this commission that we have been looking at. I don't think there's any other major climate related news.
Okay, staff update.
okay. I guess I'll just echo what Tanya said. Major win to have the on-bill financing resolution approved. I've spent the bulk of my time since well, for the last 2 months of just trying to get this application ready. It was a little bit challenging and frustrating to go to council with that while I was in the middle of a vacation with my family. but it worked out good. And I think the further complicated, I guess, by Adam and Melanie and Dave Lohman all departing in short time span, since those are all key players in kind of giving input on this project and helping to push it forward. So I actually did get a short extension from the USDA. I'm planning to submit all the paperwork next week. I still have to send it snail mail. So hopefully I will have everything in place by then. The REST program, I think, in my opinion, the single biggest thing we can do to move existing buildings in Ashland. So I'm really excited to see where we can take that. Once I submit the application, we'll probably want to circle back and do some more strategic outreach, make sure we have all the political support we need to make that program work. Also, we'll see a couple other things happening. E-bike program is still going good. We have the new induction cooktop incentive is running. Very sad, Bridget will be leaving at the end of July. So you can all connect with her and say thank you for all of the amazing work she's done. Bridget, do you have anything you want to add as far as current stuff that we're doing?
Not really. I've just been trying to do more in-person outreach, and I'm gonna do outreach to the local restaurants about the induction. But all of the in-person outreach has been really good. I've gotten a lot of positive comments. One thing that was interesting was that people didn't know much about natural gas, so I know that was something you all talked about. So that's a good topic to work on.
Great, thanks. So I guess I'll leave it there unless there's questions about anything in particular.
Is there anything, sorry?
I was just wondering, have people been borrowing the induction cooktops out of the library of things? I know I've told several people they were, wow, I didn't know that. That's great.
Not yet. The library is still cataloging them, so they can't be checked out quite yet. More towards the end of the summer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anything that the commission can do to assist Stu on the application?
I don't think so. We've done everything that we need to do at this point in time. Once we are formally approved and are ready to begin borrowing dollars, I think we'll want to regroup and do some outreach to folks and make sure everybody understands the scope of it before we go back to council.
Stu, what would be the timeline if we get approved for that?
Your guess is as good as mine. My understanding is that because we've already submitted a letter of intent and a draft program outline, they are probably fairly ready to go, but I can't, they haven't committed to me any sort of timeline. My guess is it could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 months.
Okay, well, I want to thank Bridget for all her work on the behalf of the commission. You've done a stellar job in moving things forward. And so we're really glad that you were here and sad to see you go.
Thank you. I'm glad I got to work with you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Other announcements. I have one. In the packet, there was a copy of the memo that I sent to the chairs of the Transportation Commission and the Climate or Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission. So that's just informational so that everybody knows what's going on. I heard back from Linda, and I have not yet heard back from Marnie. And well, we're on this topic. I lost my throat. It'll come back to me. Let's see, are there any other announcements from the commissioners? Let's see. And, oh, sorry, Tanya?
It's not really an announcement, but I'm hearing a dinging in my ear. And
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's me.
oh,
I'm
okay,
trying to
that's
figure
fine.
out I'm trying to figure out how to stop it.
Okay, that's fine.
Tanya's just relieved that it's not her.
Yes, indeed. That's I just wanted to make sure I wasn't somehow like putting this in because I had no idea how to stop it either.
Well, I just tried something. Hopefully that'll do
Yeah.
it.
I had a question on your memo. I see, have you been meeting with the Ashland Climate Coalition? In terms
yeah.
of the, I know you were looking for other commission heads to meet together with Ashland Climate Action Project. So have you been going to those meetings?
Well, there haven't been any meetings. There's been discussion about how to get that going again.
Okay.
What's going on with the council has had impact downstream. And so we're trying to figure that out. It is the case, I don't know if I had mentioned this before, but the Transportation Commission did approve at their last meeting for their chair to represent the commission at the coalition. And as I mentioned, I haven't yet heard back from the chair of the CCOC. And so I listened to their last meeting and the topic never came up. So I don't know what the situation is there. Bruce Borgenson, who will be representing Sohiva, is formally stepped forward to be part of the coalition as well. So we have a number of sort of the pro-climate action folks, both commissions and community organizations that have stepped forward to be part of the coalition. But no meeting has actually occurred just yet. And summer vacations are also an issue in getting that all done. Okay. I assume there's no public forum. I think, Jeff, did you volunteer for the action items for this month? Is that right? Okay.
I can do next month.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Nothing has happened on commissioner recruitment. Anybody that is out there listening? I'm trying to figure out how to turn that off. No, I'm sorry, you're probably just going to put up with it because I'd have to pause the meeting for quite a while to go and take care of it. Sorry. So if anybody is out there listening to this meeting and would like to join the commission, there are 2 open slots. Please get in contact either with me or I believe the city recorder is how you start the formal process. Formal planning, right?
Okay. A couple of things happened. We were set for July to have council adopt the TAP master plan and the stormwater and drainage master plan. Both of those have been taken off the look ahead agenda. Scott's not sure when he'll get them back. I'm still thinking this year, but we'll see. As far as the TAP, he still needed some more input from Phoenix and Talent. Also, I don't know if the new money that we got for changes to the TAP will be integrated into this update, you know, as far as Ashland being able to provide water back into the TAP. So right now, those are sitting like they are. I did send after last month's meeting, my discussion with Scott. And he agreed to put in reference to our water management plan into the TAP, since he already had Talent and Phoenix in there. And to me, that's important because that is the document that will plan to have a climate study update done for our water supply sources. Any questions on that part? Okay. The other thing is I updated the transportation system plan. I saw in their minutes that there's a proposal to start August 21st or August 21. I think that was dependent also on getting some funding. So Gary, I don't know if you have any comment on that, but it looked like they wanted to start kicking that update off.
Yeah, the thing that's pending is the council's approval of the basically the scope of work and the consultant contract. And presumably that will happen this month in order to allow that August kickoff to happen. But certainly there are a lot of unknowns out there.
Okay, so we'll be tracking that and see if that starts. The last thing I wanted to mention was the electric tenure planning study. I know we were waiting to understand if we still had funding for that, post all the budget discussions. And I think we still have that. Is that true, Stu or Tanya? Do you know?
I think it's probably time for us to meet with Tom again sometime soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we could start putting together some kind of schedule of what we want to do in that area, which would fold into our electric sustainability initiative. Okay, that's all I had for now.
Ray, I just wanted to also let you know and the rest of the commission that I spoke with Tom, and he has offered to have someone from the association that helps us navigate our Bonneville contract speak to the group and answer questions about the Bonneville contract and kind of how that whole process is working and how the contract works and all of that. So if we would like to invite that person to come in, our main contact with that industry group, to come in and have a conversation with the commission, Tom said he would be happy to help set that up. And that might be a good primer as we get into more and more of these discussions about the contract.
I'll be happy to take that as an action item.
Yeah.
Would you?
That sounds good.
Yeah. And so, Rick, if you just want to reach out to Tom and let him, you know, if we want to take him up on that, he said he'd be happy to set it up.
Yes, well, I think that's a good idea. And so if there's no objection from the rest of the commission, then I'll go forward with getting that set up. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. So Ray, are you done now?
Yep.
Okay. Climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking. Gary?
As you, I hope, remember, we acted upon this last month, but we didn't make a formal motion. And if the council's considering our recommendation, a formal recommendation is probably necessary. I prepared one as a part of my submission for the agenda. If somebody would like to make that motion, this one will be done, and we'll forward the materials along to the council for their consideration.
Before we go into that, I believe the one that's in the packet is not the most recent version of this. And so in the motion, I'd like for the commission to authorize some non-content changing, editing, and revision of text, rather than only the one that's presented in the packet.
Right. I think I made clear that that was a draft and it is undergoing revision. And the only thing that's changing is the council memorandum, the recommendation and the materials that we reviewed last month will remain as they are, because that's what we as a commission acted upon. But the formal memo to the council, that's still in flux, and I'm working on that as we speak. With the approval of this motion, I'll finalize that memo and forward it along to Stu, who I hope can get it on the council's agenda sooner rather than later, so that our comments come in the development of the rule rather than after the publication of the draft.
Bob?
Thanks. I mean, I did see my questions really. I had a couple of questions. As we said last meeting, I support the recommendation for the whatever it's called, the transportation planning rule, blah blah blah, acronym. But I had a couple questions about the cover memo that you're preparing, and I did see that it was a draft. So I don't know. And I guess it's a moving target. But I guess I had a couple questions, which are: is it the normal procedure that it would be from you, Gary, or is it from Stu, or is it from the climate policy, or is it from Rick? So I guess that's something you guys are going to work out. I don't really have a view as a commissioner on what it should be, but we should definitely should do what raises the least amount of questions about, the authority for doing it. Then I think that there needs to be an explanation there. Maybe you're already working on this, about the fact that this comes from the CPC rather than the Transportation Commission, and why it comes from the CPC rather than the Transportation Commission. Because I think it could land on council members' desks, and they could say, well, what does the Transportation Commission think about this? So it would be nice to really clarify that even this is really about climate, not about transportation or whatever the things are. And then you do say that it's mostly about transportation, but there is the goal 10 housing rules. There's 2 points on that. One of them is kind of transportation related, and the other one is completely not. So I don't know, it may just, I think you need to say something about that in the government memo as well. I don't know what. So I offer these as suggestions to the drafters of this cover memo for the council, so that it arrives at council with the clearest possible understanding of what it is and why we're the ones that are putting it there. Yeah. But very nice work doing it. I think it's an important advance for the state's rulemaking.
Yeah, the whole issue of other commissions, I think, is a kind of a quandary, quite frankly, because certainly there's the Equity Committee, the Conservation Climate Commission, the Housing Commission. I mean, conceivably, all of those commissions could have weighed in on this rule, right? I mean, and conceivably, we could have reached out and coordinated with all of them as well. But given the timeframes that we're working with, if that were to be undertaken, we would be commenting on the draft rule, which at this point, the comments that we've formulated would be presumably largely irrelevant, because the draft will either include or not include the ideas that we've articulated. And I think, at least in my experience, being early to the game in the development of a rule is much better than trying to influence once a draft's been released. So it's somewhat of a tactical issue. We need to get it done.
Jeff? I'm sorry, you're not done, Bob?
Well, I was done, but I was just trying to react to something that Gary said. So,
Why don't you go ahead and then Jeff? Okay.
Yeah, I think, beefing up a little bit more in the fact that this is in response to the governor's executive order 20-04. And what is that? That's right. About climate, just put climate all over it, Gary. This is about climate. I don't know if that will satisfy people, but people need to be, it's not you start reading it, it's all talking about transportation. So it just begs the question.
Yeah, I have in fact pulled out some of those details relating to transportation and focusing instead on a section that the CPC hasn't reviewed, which emphasizes really the spectrum of benefits that accrue from creating a more diverse transportation system, more multimodal, I guess, and reducing VMT. I mean, that's really the reason that the rule is important, is because it will help Ashland to achieve a multitude of objectives, including equity, housing, transportation, affordability, climate, I mean, air quality, you name it, water quality. There's all these and sundry benefits that accrue from the adoption of this policy if it were to be adopted as the CPC is recommended.
Gary, good work here. I had a couple comments. One is the approach you're taking, you're going into the rule or the proposed rule and actually wordsmithing it. An alternative approach would be from the city of Ashland, here's kind of our priorities or what we would like to see in it at a higher level. That seems like it'd be easier to get, for example, city council to understand it and vote on it. This is okay if you think, you know, they won't get tied up in the detail. I have a couple examples of that. I think when I go through here, there's a few areas where it conflicts with electrification of the motor vehicle fleet, EVs. And there's just a couple places in here where the emphasis is really on mode shifting, and maybe it neglects EVs a little bit. In number 8 here, there was a question, 15% reduction in light duty motor vehicles per year, per decade. I think it means per decade, but somewhere else it was not completely clear. And then on the EV portion in number 16, if there's targets in there, they should track forecast for charging systems, for example. It should kind of track projections for EV adoption in Oregon. But I'm just using those as an example. So if somebody gets into this, there's going to be, you know, questions about the details, but I'm totally okay with it, you know, the way it is. I would like to see a little bit more emphasis on electrification.
Interestingly, you know, the rule authors basically are dealing with the rule itself and looking for specific changes and edits, basically. And the organization of our recommendations are to facilitate their consideration of our comments. I understand where you're coming from in terms of the council's understanding of the scope of what we're hoping for. I'm at least hoping that the memo kind of serves to provide that guidance. Because again, what we really want to see are specific changes in the existing rule to better address climate issues. And the way to get that done is to provide explicit changes by section. I mean, that's the way it happens.
Okay.
But thanks. I'll you know, again, my expectation is that in terms of the materials that we reviewed last month, I'm not going back in and making changes to that, because otherwise we're spinning our wheels in some respects. All I'm really hoping the commission will basically formalize your action or our action last month to forward it to council for consideration. And I would add that, you know, a lot of this is about trying to provide background about climate and about transportation and about housing to the council so that as we move forward.
Uh-oh. I don't know if you can hear me, Gary, but you just froze up. While we're waiting for him to come back, I was wanting to ask Stu and Tanya about the process issues. Both how staff would actually get this put on the agenda and how the really gnarly problem is if we try to coordinate with every commission that possibly has something to do with this, it could easily turn into never being able to do anything. And so Tanya, if you can comment on that aspect of it.
I think that that's part of the difficulty, and we've seen it with the work we've been trying to do just on the joint campaign, the engagement campaign, is that coordination takes a lot of time. It really does extend out the space. So, what also complicates it is just the load that's on the city council agendas for the next several months. And so I think there's some sort of a balance between the time it takes to get it together and when council will be able to look at it anyway. The reality of what is happening because we are losing those 3 key administrators is it's a profound impact on the work of the council. We are spending a lot of our time right now simply trying to figure out how to fill those positions. And so the standard way of operating and getting things onto the agenda may change with a new interim city manager coming in August. And typically it hasn't been that difficult to get things on the agenda, but they get bumped from time to time, of course, but there may be some procedural elements that are changing with so many staffing changes coming up. So I don't know exactly the best answer, but I think maybe we look at the look ahead, the council's look ahead, and figure out which meeting do you want this to be at, and then figure out how much coordination can be done with the other commissions ahead of that. But it's a difficult situation that we're in.
Well, I think the concept was to put it on the consent agenda. Are you suggesting that is not a likely path forward?
It is not necessarily a fast forward because a lot of our consent agenda items are being pulled and discussed. And so I think that there needs to be the same level of detail in the packet around there that we have, that has been coming forward. But there's the council is going right up to 9:30 on almost all of its meetings, even when a significant number of the elements are in the consent agenda. So I think it's okay to give it a shot. It's just that we should expect that there's a decent chance of it getting pulled.
Okay, well, if we presume that we're going to continue down the path because of the timing that Gary has suggested, we can't really just drag this out, or
right.
We go start over in some sense.
Right.
And so now, Stu, can you speak to what the details are of how this will go forward to be put on the consent agenda, even if it means the council doesn't?
Yeah. So we can simply, once we have the memo from the commission that states whatever it wants to state about the policy, that comes to me. I'll go ahead and type up the blue staff memo that goes on top of it. So we can, borrow some of the content that is on there, but for the most part, CPC can create its own memos saying whatever it wants to say about it. I think that the more streamlined it is, the less likely it'll get pulled for discussion. If we state simply, here's a state agency that's asking for input on climate issues, we suggest that you communicate X, Y, and Z because that supports our climate plan. And, you know, if we do not have, I think it would be wise to coordinate with other commissions who think they might have an interest, assuming there's not a deadline getting in the way of that, especially since we know council is going to be locked up for a while. So yeah, did I speak to all the bits there?
You did, but I just don't think it's possible to reach out to all those commissions and try to get some kind of approval from them along the timeline that Gary suggested is necessary for this to be effective. So I think the decision that's actually before us is whether we're just going to go forward with this as it stands and see what happens or give up. I think those are our choices. Ray?
I would certainly.
I don't know, Tanya, did you have something along the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to go ahead and put it forward. I just think we should expect that it might get pulled. The last piece that we had that was about the on-bill financing was on the consent agenda and got pulled, and it didn't have any financial impact, but it still had a long conversation, and it actually didn't pass with a wide margin. It passed 4-2. So I think it's okay to put it on there. I just think we should be ready for some discussion, and there might need to be some outreach to commit to counselors ahead of it. But if the two options are to put it forward just as this commission or to not put it forward because there isn't time to coordinate with the others, then I would say go ahead and put it on, and we just need to, this commission probably needs to do some outreach to counselors to make sure that any questions that they have would be answered.
Okay, Ray, and then I think we need to move to either having a motion or not.
Okay, Gary, I see a conflict. There's 6 goals that start out in the beginning of the document. Goal C, limit use of off-street parking mandates, is in conflict with the EV in my eyes, because the goal C may be driven by housing, but further down on page 14, there's a goal of increasing the amount of EV chargers on off-street parking. So I don't really like that we want to limit off-street, because I think that would hurt the ability for charging.
Actually, the notion behind parking is to reduce reliance upon the automobile, and certainly creating alternatives to the automobile, which we haven't done. I mean, we have a monomodal transportation system, and until we create something that serves the needs of the broader population, we're going to need more parking. Mm-hmm. This is kind of a stepwise process where we get the transportation system so people can actually ride a bike safely for all uses, all things, and from everywhere to anywhere. And then the demand for parking decreases, and we can conceivably see a reduction at that point. It's really a part of, in some respects, a broader vision about reducing reliance upon our automobiles. I really don't see that, the EV issue being fundamental to this, truthfully, because that's really a part of community adoption or nationwide adoption in some ways. To the degree we can facilitate that by providing EV charging and parking spaces, so much the better. But the real issue for me is ensuring that we create alternatives so that people actually do have a choice, so that maybe they aren't buying a second car, but instead relying upon an automobile or a bicycle or walking more frequently. So again, I see your point, and I understand, but I really don't see that as a conflict, but rather just the overall transition to a more multimodal transportation system.
I think eliminating off-street parking doesn't get rid of automobiles.
Well, right now, as it stands, we've got an abundance of parking, unless of course you talk to the chamber and then we don't have enough parking. But you can see in the experience of Medford where they're taking their parking garages and converting them, or taking on-street parking lots and converting those, that the panacea of parking in terms of stimulating merchant sales in at least the Medford town downtown hasn't actually played out the way that it might. And what they've discovered, and I think most cities have now adopted, is trying to get new uses downtown, particularly residential uses, so that there is more vitality in the community and provides ready customers for those businesses in some respects. Anyway, it's probably a longer discussion than we have.
Okay,
Bob,
I'm ready to make a motion.
please.
I move that the CPC forward to the City Council the following recommended amendments to Oregon Administrative Rules 660-12 and 660-8, and request that the City Council forward them to the Department of Land Conservation and Development with any changes that the commissioner who prepared this would like to insert that were discussed in this meeting today.
Second.
Do you want to speak to your motion, Bob?
I think we already went through this last week or last month and approved it, wanted to go forward, and we're looking for the correct way to go forward. I still think it's an excellent way to go forward. I think that a couple of the commissioners raised a couple of points that warrant some consideration, and I wouldn't want Gary to feel in a straitjacket to take into account some good suggestions, but I'd leave that up to his discretion and just go forward.
Great.
yeah, there was one suggestion. If we can shorten it at all, it might be more amenable to the council reading it.
I think that was about the cover letter, and I think we're just voting on the. I was voting on the actual recommendations to the for the rule change. I'm not talking about the cover memo, which I think is going to be a separate thing that is going to be worked out. That was just a draft anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, so my understanding is that the recommendations would go forward pretty much as they stand. We're not in a position to do a major simplification and rewrite at this point. So my understanding is your motion, Bob, is to send them forward pretty much as is. And the discretion is on the cover memo to address the various points that were brought up tonight. Is that a fair understanding of the motion?
No, I was referring only to the recommendations that go to the rulemaking body. There were a couple of Jeff had a couple of suggestions about some things that I thought would warrant some further thought, and Gary's response to the suggestions was we didn't want to be in a never-ending loop of consideration of these things. I think we can leave it up to Gary's discussion on those. The cover memo, I think, is going to take some considerable reworking, and Stu explained that he's going to have to be he's going to be doing that anyway. It's not really from the CPC could put its own memo on there, but it's not really the staff transmittal memo. That's what I understood from Stu's comment, is that staff would actually put something very simple saying that this is what it is, and it comes more from Stu. And did I get that wrong, Stu?
No, that's right. I mean, the bulk of what's in that memo that Gary made would just be the CPC memo, and I'll make my own to go on top.
Okay,
let's see if I've understood it.
Sorry.
We would, your motion is only addressing what would go to DLCD, the specific recommendations, and you are proposing that Gary have discretion to modify it somewhat, given the commentary from tonight.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that's the motion. And let's stick to that then. Is there any further discussion on that motion? I'm not seeing any, so all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous.
Rick, I just have a follow-up, and that is just on the timing. I've just been looking at the look ahead for council, and knowing that August 6th is the last day for our interim city manager and our finance director. And it looks like there may be space on the July 20th meeting. I think it's the 20th. It's the 20th. The second in July meeting. But I know that the packet materials have to be in by the Friday before the release date. So that's tomorrow, if I'm reading the calendar correctly. Are we looking to get this information in to try to get it on that the second July meeting?
Well, my understanding is that is the hope.
That's the hope. Well, I'm just saying that we need to then make sure that it's turned around and into Adam tomorrow. And if I can be helpful in any way, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, well, that sounds like this is largely a issue for Stu and Gary. Do you both think that this is possible?
Absolutely.
Anya, it has to be in a week before the
It has
Friday.
to be in, yeah, it has to be into to the city manager. The raw materials have to be in so that he has time to review them, ask questions, get clarifications, that sort of thing, before they're finalized and put out the following Thursday or Friday.
But you're saying the meeting's the 26th?
No, the meeting is the
19th?
20th.
20th. The meeting is the
okay.
20th.
I got it.
So if we're, I think we have the best shot if we look at the meeting on the 20th, because I think the meeting on the 2nd is going to be very full. I know it's going to be, the conversations are going to take up the whole time. So it would just mean that we have to turn this around and get it over there tomorrow to have a chance of getting it into the packets and getting it onto the consent agenda.
I'll have this memo to you on your desk or in your email box tomorrow morning at 8.
Okay, sounds good. And Gary, I don't know if you were here for the part of the meeting when I said you can just make that a memo from CPC. It doesn't need the blue box at the top and all that.
Okay.
I'll make a cover letter for it.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we have a plan of action, and there's been a formal motion, and we've approved that. So Gary, is there anything else on this topic?
Nope. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next topic is adaptation. Tanya, do you want to lead us through a discussion on the material that was in the packet?
Sure. When we left last time, we were talking about Bob and I were going to meet and work through some of what we thought would be the issues that would need to come forward in a sort of a supplemental set of recommendations around adaptation. And that wasn't able to happen with everything that's been happening on council. I wasn't able to call that. But the idea here is the same as what we had in front of us last time. I think we just didn't have a chance to get through it. And so that task plan is to look back at the climate vulnerability assessment that was completed alongside the formal SEEP process, and then review it and decide what needs to be addressed going forward. So not necessarily addressing it, but identifying for council and for city staff and for this commission what needs to be looked at. We had talked in here around the task and timeline around developing that outreach and engagement plan. But I think what we're looking at now is really more of a condensed report to the council that says, here are the elements of the vulnerability assessment that have not been addressed up to this point in the SEEP that we think need to be addressed in some fashion, whether that's through public engagement, whether that's through emergency planning, wherever that might necessarily be. So I think that it's more now of a research project and a set of recommendations than it is a public engagement process that we were thinking of earlier. How does that sound to you, Rick?
Well, it's my opinion has been that, and so really, I think you're asking the whole commission this question, not
Right.
just has been that we're going to have our plates full with the 5 initiatives we already have,
Right.
and particularly with where everything is with the city right now. I think that's even more true, and so I don't personally want to spend the time going through that vulnerability assessment and see if the city and the community of Ashland is doing everything we can reasonably do at this time. And my reasoning for that is that the adaptation elements that are critically important are already being addressed by other bodies besides CPC. So I'm not a proponent of even doing the level of work that you just outlined. So I'd like to hear from the other commissioners about where they stand on this. Ray? You're muted, Ray.
Tanya, when I read it, I see that, there was an initial work plan to update the SEEP eventually after some public input. So I think identifying where the SEEP is lacking and need whenever we do update it has to be done on adaptation, I think is good. I'm not sure what we do with that work item or when we start that. As Rick said, I think some of the highest level impacts for adaptation, such as extreme heat and drought and water, we're working on in other ways. And I see some of the initiatives that we're doing overlap with that. But I don't know, those are just my comments. I think I agree to take that on right now, like a SEEP update for adaptation or whatever, wouldn't fit within our current scope.
Right. And if I can just respond to that, the document that's in this packet, it's from February. In my mind, we had already moved past that and had gotten to the point where we're talking about sending in a summary report. And that being, I don't know what our terms are, update, whatever it is, whatever our obligation is to council, that it's not a fully redone plan. If we were digging in deeply, what I put in front of you would be appropriate in that space. But from our conversations from last time, I believe we'd come to the point of saying, we think we just need to take a look at this vulnerability assessment and see where the gaps are and identify those for council. There are some that are missing. Nobody is really dealing with downtown flooding. I've reached out to Scott Fleury. We have done some improvement since the last major flood, but there's the businesses that are down there are potentially in relatively significant jeopardy, and there isn't an indication that has been handled. So there are a number of things. I think we just need to do a matching exercise to see what is in that vulnerability assessment that is not fully addressed in the SEEP, and identify that for council and say, to the extent that this can be handled within the existing planning processes of the city, it should be highlighted in those planning processes, and then we see where we get.
Gary?
Tanya, do you think, well, maybe there already exists, but a matrix of all the adaptation strategies and what commission or department is currently addressing them. And maybe through that kind of a matrix, we can identify what is missing and concentrate our efforts on trying to figure out how to fill those empty slots, basically. Would that get us closer to where we need to be? Certainly, you know, the Forest Commission and the fire departments dealt with a lot of the fire reduction issues, so that we can take off the plate, which is clearly a huge element. But the assessment went in far greater detail, and it seems like we need to be using that detail to identify where we should be concentrating as a commission.
Right. So with the regular part of SEEP, what we have are strategies that don't always have a home. What we have on the adaptation side is the identification of the vulnerabilities without always identifying the strategies. So in the places where we've identified strategies, like what you mentioned, Gary, around reducing wildfire risk, there is work that's been happening, really good work that's been happening. But there are other vulnerabilities for which strategies have not been identified. And that's where we run into the problem. And I think that's where city staff and council need some guidance. And so it's not a big lift in terms of this group. I would be prepared to go and do that assessment, do that sort of cross-hatching, which is what you're talking about, Gary. You know, what is it we're doing on these pieces? What have we identified real strategies around, and what's still empty and kind of is the gap? And then I think, you know, we don't necessarily identify this commission as the ones to fill those gaps. We're simply identifying those for the council and for the staff, so that in the places where they could get to those on some level through existing work, they know about them. They know that it's important to address the climate angle on them.
I think that would be a valuable addition to our understanding of the current state of affairs. And so I would support you doing that work if you're willing and able.
Okay, Jeff has had his hand up.
I've got a couple comments. One, coming from a corporate environment, this is the sort of problem or exercise that would really lend itself to a fairly short, maybe less than half a day, maybe only 2-day workshop, where you get 6, 8, 10, you know, educated, interested people in here, and you could come out of that with a matrix and a much better understanding, again, of where the gaps were. So it wouldn't be that difficult to do in that kind of setting. My second comment is, if we're recruiting new people for this commission, which we are, we maybe should say this is what we would like you to be working on, because I don't think the existing commissioners here have the bandwidth necessarily to take this on, unless it were, you know, something like a finite workshop.
Bob?
Yeah, so I mean, my concern really is about our ability to do this. And I've always assumed and hoped that Tanya, who's an expert in this area, would kind of lead the effort. And if Tanya thinks that she has the bandwidth to push forward with something that's trimmed down from what was in the packet and what we were thinking of a few months ago, including with some sort of session like Jeff was suggesting, which sounds interesting and plausible to me, I would certainly support that, and I would help. I mean, I certainly couldn't lead anything like this. It's way beyond my scope, but I certainly would be willing to help you, Tanya, if I could, if you're willing to take it on. But I think the question really is, if not you, who?
Well, and I would just say that it's a high level gap assessment. This is not identifying strategies. It's not, because that definitely needs that workshop element that Jeff was talking about. To develop those strategies really does. And we have staffing constraints in terms of being able to even pull those folks into a room for half of a day. I don't think we should put a plan together that requires that. It is more of a high level assessment, and if Bob is willing to work with me on it, I think the two of us could bring something back and do something, you know, along the lines of what Gary has done, which is to do the research, to do the analysis, and then bring a draft back to the group for inclusion with the whatever it is we're calling the report to council.
So that's a bit of an issue now, because that's on a very short fuse, is what I understand, because I think the timing on that is really having something for the rest of the CPC update to be ready next month, so that it kind of feeds into the report to the council. Is that, I see Rick.
I'm very dubious that
Okay.
this pulled together. I really am not
In time for that.
trying to change the CPC update for this year. If we want to say something, the plan for the 21-22 year, that's going to include something, this very scaled down thing, I think that could go in there. But to the level of being a separate initiative that is going to go on for multiple meetings and have multiple discussions and all that kind of thing. I just don't think we have even the meeting time to do that. As I'm hearing this being outlined, there's going to be a few hours of effort put into identifying the major gaps, writing a page or two of memo, bringing that back for CPC to say, oh, yep, that looks about right, and sending it off to council, and it's done. It's not going to be something that's going to consume us for the whole year. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've already decided not to rework the SEEP. So my thinking was that this would join whatever we were going to say to council around this. And now I'm realizing I don't remember exactly what we decided in terms of what would be going to council when, but my idea was that this would join anything else that we felt was important to send in as an update or whatever it is that language is.
Oh, okay, I see. Well, so my preference would be not to try to get it done in time for the update that is our next topic of discussion, and that we only have one more meeting to approve it, and then it's time for it to go to council because the yearly update has to happen. I just don't see that this. What I was hoping we were doing is providing a little more runway to get this memo put together, and that in maybe August, certainly September, CPC would take it up and say, yes, this is what makes sense, and that it go off to council separately. I wasn't thinking we were going to combine these two things.
When do you have to have it ready to, if it's combined? I think it's more effective if it's combined with the other elements. And I don't think it's going to take a lot of analysis. I think Bob and I, if Bob has got some time this month, I think we could get it in front of the commission in August. And then if there's a lot of disagreement on it, then we don't include it. But if we could possibly get it into the September update, I would like to.
Okay, Ray?
I guess getting it into the September update, I'm kind of agreeing with Rick. We can decide if it should be added in the 21-22 work we're doing. Not necessarily complete, just like all the other 5 initiatives. They're not complete. We're just saying this is what we're going to be working. That would give us more runway rather than get it complete and add it into the update.
Well, it's even inconsistent with the way that the update is being organized right now. There's only like 2 or 3 paragraphs for every initiative. And
Right.
to have 1 or 2 pages devoted to this topic would just be disproportionate. Gary?
I was going to suggest that whatever Tanya and Bob come up with, that can be digested down as to a description of how we're addressing adaptation in the current period. And then we can talk about how we're going to use that in the 21-22 work scope. I think the council needs to know we're addressing this and how we will bring back more information to them in the future to ensure the city is prepared for what's coming. I think that's one of our obligations. We may not have the answers, but I think we need to describe for them where we're going with adaptation as a part of this update.
Bob?
Yeah, I mean, this is really yeah, it's interesting because we're about to talk about the CPC update, which is, and I recalled from the last meeting that we're talking about a very short time frame for that and drafting it for approval next month. And it is, each section as it's laid out is going to be very short, laying out, in fact, the work plan for the remainder of the year, remainder of the May to May schedule. So in a sense, it's, I guess the onus is on Tanya and me to see if we can come up with something that, next month, this group decides whether it's ready for prime time to be included in that or not. And it doesn't need to be the whole exercise. It shouldn't be the whole exercise, but it's laying out what that exercise is, and then assigning leadership to it if that's the route we decide to take in the next consideration of the next item, that it would be Tanya doing it, and I'd be doing, playing sidekick. I think it's a relatively, I think we're having a little bit of it's a little bit of the cart before the horse trying to decide. I think we all agree it's an important issue. It's an important gap. It's something that the CPC should be thinking about. We haven't really taken it up in full measure. What is it? I think we need to articulate for the CPC update that Rick will be presenting to the council in September, is what we're hoping. What we'll be doing in this, what we're doing on it this year, and I think that's really the thing that will be. So there's a little more time to do the thing that Tanya said is that could actually be done in fairly short order, because we're really describing what that is, and we've got to satisfy this group next month whether we can do that and whether that deserves the priority. So I would support doing that, and I think we just defer whether or not it's in the CPC update until next meeting when we'll have all the pieces.
Well, I'm fine with that, because maybe that this whole thing boils down to not very much.
Not very much work, but rich and important.
Yes, not very many words, even though those words describe a lot. And so I'm fine with going at it in that route. So I guess what I want to do is start the conversation about the CPC update at this point, rather than trying to belabor this, because I think it would become more clear how this would work out if it does.
So let's make sure that we've got the action item. The action item is that Tanya, with my assistance, will come up with the piece that could potentially be integrated into the CPC update for discussion, that lays out a plan for adaptation in this next work period, for decision next time. Does that make sense? Does that capture the action, Rick and Tanya?
It makes sense to me. Tanya, you're.
Yeah, I know. I'm. It works for me.
Thank you.
Okay. Then I think it's time to move on to the CPC update. I want to remind everybody that the schedule that was laid out was to have the first draft presentation at this meeting in August, the second draft, gather comments assign the final review team if there's any need for that. But we need to approve the document for council presentation. And my notion is that you would send that document into the council packet, and that the chair would be responsible for reducing it to some sort of the 10-minute presentation. I do not propose that presentation be brought forward in August because I don't know what the final content will be at that point. And then on September 7th, will be presented to council, and the September CPC meeting, we discuss whatever feedback we receive from council. So that's my notion of the schedule they're on. Is there any comment on that schedule? Seeing none. Then let me actually get it up in front of my. Okay. Jeff, do you want to lead us through this now?
Sure. Okay, again, this is a continuation of last month's discussion on the CPC update. We've got a draft that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 70%. There's some sections that are very, very incomplete and sketchy, and other sections, especially the front end of the document, is fairly well refined at this point. So what we want to do today is do just a quick overview of the document. You all probably have that in front of you, and can talk to the intent and format, but we don't really need to go into the detailed content. That's for the reviewers of each of the sections to do as we move forward. So we wanted to structure the discussion today around 6 questions that Rick posed, and they're here in this write-up, and we'll get back to those in a minute. Thanks to Gary for contributing, a lot of detailed information that we could then kind of condense and pull the highlights out. And then obviously, when we do that, Gary, you've got to look and make sure that we've got the key points, the essence of the program there. And then another reminder is that this document going forward is supported by more detailed documents. So we can't put everything in here, otherwise it would be 50 pages or so. So the intended audience, this is the overview, CPC. So the real intent here is it helps us get our act together and coordinated around what our mission and what our game plan is for the next year, and communicate that not just to the city council, but to city staff that we interface with, and other commissions and members of the community that are interested in it. So the moving on to the just kind of the overview, I think you all have seen how the document is structured. There's an executive summary, introduction, some background material, discussion about the goals on the SEEP, and then the activity 2020, 2021, and then looking forward as to what we plan on doing in the next May to May year. So without further ado, maybe unless anyone has any general comments before we get into the questions that the chairman has posed for the commission. Okay, the first one, is the CPC chair or delegate responsible for drafting the CPC annual update? So open for discussion, or thumbs up, thumbs down.
Who else would draft it?
I guess the alternate way of putting together a document like this is that we parcel it out to individual commissioners. The intent here is that the individual commissioners provide information which then gets pulled together by the chairman and myself. That way I guess you would say that hopefully the flow is better and just the wording, the sentence structure, all that stuff is a little bit more coherent across the entire document. Bob.
Jeff, you said that the document's 70% there. So in a sense, and I suppose it was mostly written in the way that you're suggesting, that CPC chair or delegate is responsible for drafting and kind of received some inputs from Gary and others. We're really just ratifying the process that happened and would continue forward to finish it up in the next month. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think by this time next month, I don't know, Rick, we need to be at least 90, probably 95% complete on the draft.
So
Yes, that's what's happened so far. But I just wanted to raise the question because we're still establishing precedent for how this commission operates. And so short of deciding to change it, this is something that would happen next year, presumably, and the year after that, and so on. And so that's why I wanted to raise this particular question.
So it looks like there's general agreement. Yes. Gary?
The only issue that I see is, the content, and we're just going to have to wrestle with that at the commission once you've, provided a complete draft. Clearly, the principal initiatives, the persons or people who are responsible for that may have their own perspectives. I'm hoping that those perspectives get brought forward ostensibly because those are the folks that are going to be doing the work. And I'm hoping that the commission concurs with the direction, especially in terms of the 21-22 work. We need to make sure that everybody's on board, that the outcomes are what is desired by the CPC, not necessarily an individual commissioner.
Yes, I think we can all agree on that. And we need to make sure that people, that especially individual commissioners, get a chance to review and comment in a timely manner before we get to a very late stage draft. Okay, moving on to the next question. Should lead commissioners be identified for each initiative in the CPC update? In this, the intent, I think, Rick, you can comment on this, but this both gives some accountability and also, I think, addresses Gary's concern.
Well, there's two aspects to this. One is, do we want to have, I'm hoping that this document is going to go many places. And do we want to have a specific commissioner identified with each of the initiatives that's known to everybody that might look at this document? That I don't have a strong feeling about that one way or the other. And the other part is whether there needs to be a lead commissioner that's responsible for pushing an initiative forward. And that I do have a strong feeling on. I think we definitely need to have that. So I think I answered your question, Jeff.
Yes. Bob?
So I agree with the second part of what Rick said, is that I think we definitely need to identify for ourselves a lead commissioner on each of the initiatives, and so that we, we're each engaged, we're focused, and we need some accountability. I'm not as ambivalent as Rick about identifying individual commissioners in a document that is then presented to the council and lots of different places. For the principal reason, I actually would prefer not to do that. I think the principal disadvantage of doing that is it shrinks the work down to identify it with an individual person rather than the commission as a whole. And I think we need to maintain that, yes, I will be taking the lead on clean buildings, but it's not me by myself. It's not my pet project. It is the commission's work and the commission's standing behind it. And to identify that, in that sort of planning way, I think would risk identifying specific initiatives as pet projects of individuals rather than commission work. So I prefer not to identify it in that document, but have our own tracking, system that allows us to do it as we've been doing. I mean, it's all public information anyway, because we're having this conversation in public, but there's a little bit of a difference in a presentation to the council, where I think, Rick, you should be presenting as the entire, this is the commission's view, this is the commission's work program, and obviously our method of work is our own.
Okay, Ray? You're muted.
Bob, would you be more comfortable if names just showed up like in the formal planning tracking sheet? Or you don't want names anywhere?
If we're going to go down that path and I think Bob's identified a good reason to go down that path. I'd like to resurrect the CPC Outlook, and that will have the list of names associated with the specific initiatives and some minor commentary about what the current status is. So if it's not going to be in this document, it will be in the other one, which gets updated every month rather than every year.
Okay, general agreement, Gary?
Yeah, we are only effective as a commission. That's why we're here.
Okay, so that ball then kind of bounces over to you, Ray, as the central planner for the commission. And
I didn't quite understand Rick's comment.
yeah, is that part of the
CPC Outlook, he said.
Yeah, it was the Outlook. That was that spreadsheet that I was doing up till a couple of months ago, where it didn't really make sense to me to present a version of it during those months, but I hope to restore that concept.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Collectively, we should be able to understand where we're going to be 2 months from now. And that work helped to articulate that direction.
Right.
Okay.
So it would be separate from the spreadsheet that Ray is maintaining.
Yeah.
okay,
Right.
who is the owner of that document? Is that you,
I
Ray?
think the chair should remain.
Okay,
I mean, in some way, can you fold it into our monthly agenda?
Yeah, historically, I have been doing this, and things just got so confused that I stopped for a little while, but I want to restore it.
okay. Unless I hear an objection, we've got a general agreement on that. The next question was, should small engines be adopted as a 2021-22 initiative? Because it's a little bit of an orphan and didn't fall neatly into one of these existing initiatives. Gary?
I actually, the reason that this is even, I think, before us as a commission is I would really like to have a webinar that would invite basically manufacturers of electric powered lawn and garden equipment, affirmed by what is it, America Green Power Association, anyway, basically a certification nonprofit, and Stu, together with the commercial operators of landscape maintenance groups, those who are licensed in the city, as well as the public agencies, simply to see where we can move forward with this electrification of lawn and garden equipment. I mean, I think it's, relatively speaking, a pretty simple thing for us to do. And I would like to take that initiative on, independent of whether it's an initiative listed in the scope as, or the update as we're talking about it. In fact, I don't particularly support adding it because I just want to do a little bit of work on this thing, not a lot.
Ray?
So Gary, you're aware that the Ashland Climate Project has started some work on this.
Yes, in fact, I spoke with Lori about it today, so.
Okay, good. I
we're-
just wanted to make sure you're aware of it because it kind of
Yeah.
sounded like some of the same thing you just discussed.
There's a different focus because I think there's an opportunity for the city to move forward with the commercial landscape operators. Already, the use of a spark creating lawn and garden equipment isn't allowed during the fire season. You know, I think there's an opportunity for us to leverage that into a full phase out. And I think it's timely to begin that discussion.
So are you saying you want to keep it as an item we'll be working on, but not part of the CPC update?
It would be treated the same way it's treated in the draft, which acknowledges that we're working on this, but it's not a major initiative. I'm fine with that.
Bob?
So I'm not finding it very quickly of where it is mentioned in this CPC update. So, so I was going to, before you said that, Gary, I was going to make the observation that this is something slightly different than some of the other, than the initiatives, certainly, in that we've already, as a CPC, a year and 4 months ago, approved a strategy or an implementation plan. And I think you had some initial discussions with the Parks and Recreation, because one of the first items to take on was to really try for the city to be an example. And now we hear that the Parks and Recreation is doing some of that, and I don't know whether they're tracking the costs and doing the kinds of things that we were hoping that generating some of the data so that they could then be advocates or answer questions that others may have as they take on this. As they decide whether, how can they do it or not, or what are the challenges you're going to face in doing it. But it seems to me that we need to report. This is a report. The CPC update is a report to the council on what we've done in some sense. So it seems like we need to at least say that we've done that and what we're doing in a very abbreviated way. And then what we're doing in the future, I don't know how it belongs with an initiative or not. So that I'm interested to hear that it could be something that we spend some time on. That's not a major initiative. I agree, it's not a major initiative, but it's gonna be something that it's an ongoing effort that was started and was delayed because of the pandemic, like so many other things, but has a life.
Yeah,
point out that on page 6, the middle paragraph is, I think, what you're trying to address, Bob.
Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? I sense a consensus that it not be included as a major initiative, but is kind of a sideline project that Gary will continue to pursue it. Tanya?
Yeah, I was just wondering, in the same way that adaptation is included in the work plan, but is not an initiative, maybe there's a little section that can be added, a couple sentences in the work plan section that shows what we're carrying on with, that follows up behind what's on page 6. Just gives it that continuity.
Okay,
And
if we're finished with that one, let's move to question number 4, which we have already discussed at some length. Should adaptation be adopted as a 2021-22 initiative?
We'll know next month.
I think that's a pretty good answer. Anyone else?
Well, I think what Tanya just said, perhaps one alternative is to treat it like the small engine. I think that's something for Tanya to figure out, and me helping her, and we'll come to the group next. Well, be much before that, because it's got to actually be in the document that comes to the group. So the timeline is quite short on figuring that out, Tanya.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
Tanya's talking, but she's muted.
But I'm muted. What I would suspect is that we will sort of figure out an approach next year, or over the course of this year. And if there was a deep element of work, it would show up in the work plan for the year following. So I would leave it where it is. I wouldn't make it its own initiative, because we don't, as Rick mentioned, we don't have the bandwidth to really lift it next year, but we could figure out the approach, and that would give us time to find out, to do a little more detailed work on where those gaps really are, and figure out how we might fill them in the following year's work plan.
I would just add that, I think too, we need to exploit opportunities if they arise, and having that in our kind of a list of things to work on is a good thing.
Okay, Ray.
Yeah, I would agree. It seems like we've got things that aren't initiatives, but they're on our radar, and we may do some limited work on them as opportunities arise. So
I think it's another place where the CPC look ahead can serve that role, to keep them on the radar, but not make a big deal out of them outside of CPC.
Okay, good consensus. The next, are there any changes the commission wishes to make in the overall form and content of the draft CPC 2021 update? Ray.
yeah, Jeff, just a comment that what we have for an update is two items, right? We're going to have this document, which goes with the presentation that the chair will make.
Yes.
And both of them will be sent, out.
Presumably with a cover letter, right, Rick?
Well, my understanding is that there has to be a staff cover for all this kind of stuff. And so I don't know that there'd be anything more that the chair would write beyond the final version of this document. And that presumably it'd be a slide deck for the 10-minute presentation. But that would just be a summary of what's in the document. I don't think there would be anything new. It would be just throwing out a lot of detail, because you can't say much in 10 minutes.
Yes, and I would be surprised if we didn't have at least a few of those slides ready by the next meeting. Stu, is there a particular format for PowerPoint slides for the city council?
No, PowerPoint or PDF is fine. It's
But
really-
no letterhead type city seals, or no CPC logo?
No, the commission can do pretty much whatever it wants to identify itself, but I think technically you're not supposed to have your own logo.
Okay,
I've actually done that a couple of times already, and I just made stuff up, and nobody complained.
Bob?
I guess two comments on the answer to this question. One is I like the fact that we're wrapping, our assessment of SEEP goal progress completely in what Stu presented, very well to the council a couple of months ago. And so there's a specific mention of that. I don't know whether that might also be an annex. There could be some sort of an annex to that, because, you know, I don't know, it just seems like we never lose an opportunity to highlight that progress report, because I think it's important for people to be able to see that. Or at least a link, hyperlink to it if an annex makes it too bulky. So I would highlight this as much as you possibly can. The other thing, I think there needs to be something. You get to, when you talk about 2021 activity, there's a first heading that's coordination. I think there needs to be something that says we met, we did, we are 8. Later on in I think one of the points that Rick is going to make, he says something that we've got some vacancies. We've got two vacant positions plus 2 student vacancies. I think we need to say in terms of where we come from, the 2020, 2021. We had 9 commissioners. Now we have 8 commissioners. We had whatever many meetings, 12 meetings. I think there just needs to be just a few basic facts about what we've done. We were impacted by the pandemic just like everybody else. I don't know if we need to make a big deal of that, but I do think we need to make a big deal about the fact that I'm not sure big deal, maybe it's an exaggeration. The fact that it's not our responsibility to find new commissioners. It's it is, I guess, or maybe it is. Is it I don't, when I look at the responsibilities of the Climate Policy Commission, nowhere do I see it says commissioners shall identify and encourage additional citizens of Ashland to become part of the CPC. I think it's the mayor or the councils or somebody's responsibility to try to do that. I don't know where that's actually ever written, but the fact that we were missing 4 people is and have been without 4 people is we should make that known. We're not happy about it, and we're also not happy about the fact that we're mostly elderly white men. So I don't know, that maybe that's not something we can say quite that way, but we do aspire to have a more diverse group to reflect the broader citizenship of Ashland, and I think we are looking for the council. And maybe that's an ask, Rick, asking for the council's hard work, and to work as hard on getting commissioners for the CPC, which is, in order to implement the municipal code, that we have a fully functioning CPC, that they should do some work in trying to find some commissioners.
I would be happy to emphasize the gross lack of resources for the mandate that CPC has been given.
Okay, we will remember to note that in a slide. So in Rick's presentation, he can hit the vacancy and the, we need a more diverse community or some more diverse commissioners here.
Yeah, something like that. But it shouldn't only be in the presentation. It needs to be reflected in the report as well, because the report lives on.
Yeah, because there's like one line in there, it mentioned in passing, right? But we can beef that up. Okay.
I just wanted to reiterate something that Rick alluded to, and that's our, Stu, we love you and we love the work you do, but we don't have any staff really. No one's carrying our work forward. We're largely responsible for the initiatives that we take as a commission, and that's directly related to staff resources. And if we're going to do our work, we need more of those resources to do it. We're hampered. We're reliant upon our volunteers to carry forth and create initiatives beyond those that Stu is able to manage in his department, which are large and significant. But the things that we're doing as a commission are similarly important. And the fact that we don't have staff to help move those forward to any great degree, I think is not dissimilar to the fact that we have 4 missing commissioners.
Okay, so just to reiterate, the couple constraints on the activity of the CPC are staff resources, which is kind of tied to dollars, budget dollars, and then vacancies on the CPC itself.
Yep.
Bob?
I'm sorry. I just feel like I should say, I'm with you, Gary, but I would not want to emphasize that so much. I think none of the commission, there's a staff person who's a liaison who spends a lot of time with us, just like there's a staff person with the Housing Commission, spends a lot of time with them. You know, we're there to support the city's work. I think crying that we don't have enough staff support is probably a little tone deaf at this point. Sorry, I don't know, maybe that's a little blunt, but I'm with you, but I don't think we should be emphasizing that in here.
I do think we're pretty happy with our staff, and
We sure are. Stu is terrific, and I don't.
That's right. I mean, you could emphasize
but
that we
that's the
need
point.
staff
We want
to
to
get our
clone
work
him.
done.
yeah,
Right,
So we
Yeah.
need continued staff support.
right.
right.
Don't take Stu away from us.
Well, and you can, I think it's okay to recognize the budget issues of the city, and to also say at the same time that this is a very ambitious plan. And so we are, and we hope the council is continuing to look for more resources so that we can actually implement it. So we can do both of those things. We can be appreciative of what we have in our staff support, and ask for help bringing more commissioners on so we have more capacity there. And then just remind them that more resources really are needed to fully implement this, but we're going to do the best we can with what we have in the meantime.
Absolutely. Right.
Okay,
Well
very
said.
good. Shall we move on to the last question? I'm afraid, Rick, we're way ahead of schedule here tonight. That's never.
Oh, that would be terrible if we didn't use all the time.
Okay, the last question, does the commission wish to assign a review team for the next draft of this document? If so, who? And this is the most important one on there for me, for sure. Who reviews the document in its entirety, or who reviews sections of the document?
Yeah, and I'd like to amplify that a little more. I've had a few more days to think about this. Specifically for the plan for the 21-22 year, I know we've agreed to remove the commissioner names, but we're just moving them to a different document. I'd like to know whether each of those proposed names, and there's one that's not really labeled, have accepted that responsibility. And if so, I particularly like them to provide email feedback on what they think needs to be changed within the initiative that they are going to be leading for this next year.
I like that.
Okay, I see all the heads going up and down. Okay,
I would just add that on those initiatives, if we can, we need to forecast and to describe how we see that program or initiative manifesting itself. You know, what are the products? How's it going to be used? In some cases that may be quite clear, but in others, I think we as a commission need to, you know, have a dialogue about, is this how we're going to use this document? More particularly on the transportation, urban, and land use implementation plan, we need to have a discussion of where's that going to go? How are we going to use that? And I articulated in the write-up that I forwarded to Rick some of those, my ideas on what we would do. And I think those are important things for us to share with the council so that they understand where we're headed, not just what we're working on.
So I think one of the, at least for me conceptually, what we would do going forward was in our meetings, maybe one at a time or multiple initiatives in a certain meeting, that we would kind of focus on, okay, what is happening now, or what's the status and the activity on electrification, building electrification, for example. But these initiatives would in a sense form an outline, not just for our work, but also to some degree for our meetings.
Yeah, in my concept, it wouldn't necessarily all be addressed at every meeting, because I think chopping up the meetings as much as has occurred in the past has not been the most efficient thing to do. But over every quarter, let's say, each of the initiatives certainly should be brought forward. Might be some specific policy proposal or something like that.
I think to be more specific, because I think specificity helps in terms of the land use, urban, and transportation implementation strategy, I see parts of that being carried forward and embodied in the SEEP update, for instance. So that's kind of the direction that I see that document serving. We'll continue over the coming year to gain input, modify, change, what have you, so that when we do update the SEEP, we've got a pretty good understanding of what we want to see in it. So that's kind of how I see that document being used. That mean.
Oh no, he froze again. Well, I wanted to agree with him. Until he unfreezes, I'll do that. I have to agree with this. We know where we're going, and we can articulate that so that we all understand where the things are going. That's very useful. And the SEEP update, of course, is another complicated issue. But the other complicated issue that we need to address is coordination with other groups. While Gary's frozen up here, I want to bring back the document that Gary principally authored that went to the Transportation Commission and to CCOC, has generated controversy at the Transportation Commission. There were statements to the effect of we were trying to do their job for them, and other things that I won't bother repeating. But we need to straighten that out. And unfortunately, at the previous meeting, I had proposed that Gary and I have a chat with Linda and that kind of thing, and try to clear the air on that. And because of summer schedules, that didn't work out. And so another Transportation Commission meeting happened without the benefit of us saying, this is a draft. We are actually soliciting feedback, and we want to be working in cooperation with the Transportation Commission. We're not trying to do their jobs for them or tell them what to do. All those things need to be emphasized. And to be honest, I almost think that we need to get Gary and I on the agenda at one of the Transportation Commission meetings so that there can be a little bit of dialogue, because these written documents going back and forth are going to take forever to reach any kind of consensus. So anyway, I'm trying to amplify what Gary was saying. Oh, the other part of what he was saying is that document going into the SEEP update. Ultimately, let's all recall that the plan was to update the air, energy, and water element. I think I said that right. Of course, with everything that's going on with the city, I don't know what kind of schedule that's going to be on, but that in my mind is still the plan. Eventually, we should be leading an update of that element in collaboration with Bill Molnar and his group. And I don't think that's actually going to happen during this work year, but we'll see. It certainly is something that Gary ought to be addressing in his comments on the CPC Update 2021 document. If what he's saying is something happening during this work year to move towards that ultimate outcome.
Okay, so hi, Gary, welcome back. So going back to the question about review, I'd like to go through these different sections and make sure that the commissioners' names that are in the draft are accept responsibility to provide additional information as needed and also review the drafts as we move forward. So the on adaptation, that's Tonya and Bob. On formal planning, that's Ray. Clean buildings, that's Bob. I'm on, my name is on the path off natural gas, but I would look to Ray in particular to review and comment on that section. Energy efficient transportation, that would be Gary. Sustainable electricity, there's 3 names on there. Rick, what would you like to do with that?
I think we should stick my name on there. What I finally concluded makes the most sense.
Okay, so
unless you or Ray want to step forward.
Ray?
Well, I was just going to mention, is Chris working with Bob as well on the buildings? We don't have,
Yeah, we haven't. I haven't talked with Chris, but
oh, okay.
I would love to have him work.
I didn't want to have him feel left out. So
Yeah, well, he hasn't. Yeah.
So
he's not here today.
An action
He
item.
is he did do some. I mean, and there's a reference to the 2021 work on solar reserve and stuff like that. So
yeah, yeah. So maybe he just looks it over too.
I think that should
Provides
be part of the
comments.
action. Part of the action item. If the action item is assigning review responsibilities for each of the sections, put Chris and me for that.
Okay. Great. So there's for each of those, there's kind of work that's been done and then forecast of work in the future. So would pick up both of those. And then
Just
yes, Ray.
Just one more thing to follow up on the sustainable electricity. Yeah, Rick. Okay, so you have your name on there, but I think Jeff and I and you could provide input on that.
Oh, absolutely. No, the intent is not to describe everybody that's working on every initiative. The intent is to make sure that
You got somebody at least.
who feels it's their responsibility to know what the next step is and to make it happen.
Okay.
I'm hoping that across the commission, as people have time, interest, and specific knowledge, we'll all contribute across all these initiatives.
Yeah, and that was my last question. I mean, Rick and I will be looking at the document in its entirety, but anyone else that is willing to do that would be very, very helpful, because there will be gaps and redundancies and unclear grammar and things like that. So anyone that can edit and provide comments, that would be very useful.
Right. And we can have people we can have the whole commission send stuff to us, but we can't engage in an ongoing conversation. And so the remaining thing is there a less than quorum group that wants to work on the whole thing? It's not just Jeff and I. So that would be at most 2 more commissioners.
Well, at any rate, you will.
Would you like that, or is it easier to just do it in the way you've done it, where we just provide input and whatever's easiest for you guys. I'm happy to do it to play whatever role is easiest for you. I'm happy to help if you want that. I'm happy not to get in the way if that's more helpful.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to encourage it one way or the other. I just want to put the opportunity out there that if there's somebody else besides Jeff and I that wants to participate in getting the draft ready for the August CPC meeting, that opportunity is there.
Well, what if we provide input to you and Jeff on any part of the document that we want to? And is there some interim date that we can agree to send our input so that you have time to get that together and then make sure that we all have a draft to look at before the next meeting with the latest changes?
Yeah, well, ultimately, there's
Or-
only 3 work weeks, even though there's 4 between because of the schedule.
Yeah,
So anything that could be finished within 1 week is
Okay.
most useful.
Yeah, Gary.
And
You know, one thing that might be helpful, you know, where there's kind of a difference in policy that, you know, between one of the authors and Rick and Jeff, that be identified for the CPC, and so that we can kind of get into those details on the work program, because ultimately we want that to reflect the commission's perspective. And so if that's something you can integrate into the draft, that would be helpful in my estimation.
Bob.
I agree with that. But perhaps instead of integrating it into the presentation, it could be like a set of questions. Flag that at the beginning, like you did these other questions, so that you just draw our attention to the key issues. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, I think at the next step after the August meeting, then it's the final drafting. You're going to have something that's 90, I think you said 90 or 95% ready for the August meeting. There, I think, you know, we'll see something. It'll be clean. There'll be a number of suggestions, ad hoc suggestions on style of drafting, I think, that people could provide as well, just to get you finally over the finish line.
Okay, Tanya.
I actually wasn't raising my hand, but I do have something when we're finished with this part of the conversation. Thanks.
Okay, any any other final comments before we turn it over? Tanya, you're up.
Thanks, Jeff. I just have, when in looking at the work plan, I didn't see the coalition work on there anywhere, unless I missed it. I know that we're looking, of course, you know, primarily around the initiatives, but then we have these couple of sort of almost secondary projects. And I wonder if we should list the coalition work and potentially the integrated campaign work. At the CCOC meeting, the last CCOC meeting, they agreed to work on the integrated campaign, the Climate Resilient Ashland campaign, and take potentially to take a leadership role in that. And I know that this commission would be have a secondary role in it. It would be, we'd have a much smaller role, but I wonder if it's worth mentioning in the work plan those 2 projects.
I think yes. So it would fall into the widows and orphans section, but I'll have to find something else to call it.
Well, right at the beginning,
Jeff,
activity is the coordination section. I think it's
Right.
just a minor amplification of that section.
Well, I think that's the 2021 activity. There's nothing in the
Oh,
2021-22 activity.
I was looking at the wrong place.
So I think it's just doing the same thing in for the forward-looking stuff. I think it's right.
Okay. That's all I had, Rick.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Okay, Gary, well, you were frozen. Were you able to follow any of the stuff that I was saying?
Regrettably, my internet connection's faulty these days, or
Oh,
today
okay.
anyway. Sorry, no.
Rather than belaboring it, you can either give me a call or review the recording.
Okay.
to be sure that I represented you properly, because I attempted to amplify what you were saying.
I apologize for my not only tardiness today, but also falling out on the connection. Sorry.
That's life. And I apologize for all the beeps. My family went crazy because there was an earthquake somewhere, and I don't know the details.
Oh. Rick, the recordings, I know where to find the city council recordings, but what about the commission recordings? What are those?
The way that works is that usually by the next day, sometimes it's a couple of work days, so it might be early next week. Elizabeth takes the recording, and there's a link on the agenda page of the meeting. And you just click it and starts playing.
Oh, so the agenda gets updated with a link to the recording.
Yes.
So if okay.
And I believe that is sticky for at least a year or something like that. So you can actually go back and look at the recordings of all the prior meetings for quite a
Okay.
while. I'm not sure exactly when it times out. Okay. Well, I don't have anything right now that we haven't already talked about. We kind of hit everything I was hoping that we were going to get to. So unless there is something somebody else wants to bring up, I think it's time for us to adjourn. Is there anybody else that wants to say something? Seeing nothing, thank you all for participating, and Bridget, best of luck to you. And we are adjourned.
Well done. Nice.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.